The ancient Egyptians were very big on insurance, so they had lots of safety nets in case one thing didn't work, one spell didn't work, there was a backup spell. If this got destroyed, there was another backup object. So you always had things that would help you get to where you wanted to.
Egyptologists now believe this is why Tutankhamun took 5,000 objects to the afterlife. The more he took, the more chance he had of defeating the demons and overcoming the obstacles that lay ahead. But one shocking find has always perplexed archaeologists: the mummified bodies of 2 baby girls. The Egyptians believed at sunset, the sun god Ra died. In order to be reborn at sunrise, Ra had to travel through a dark, watery underworld. And that journey was far from plain sailing.
The journey is fraught with danger. The underworld was inhabited by gods, goddesses, demons, beasties.
And ancient Egyptians believed that would mean the end of everything.
There would be no light. We would be plunged into eternal darkness.
This would be Tutankhamun's royal mission: to make sure the sun would rise again by supporting Ra during his treacherous nightly journey through the underworld.
When he was alive, Tutankhamun would have been responsible for making sure that the priests of the sun god Ra worshipped every hour and helped the sun across the sky. But that responsibility didn't end when Tutankhamun died. He was then sailing through the underworld, helping the sun god to fight off all sorts of dangers which might have obstructed the sun and prevented the sun from being reborn in the morning. And this was of vital importance to the Egyptians.
If the king were not doing his job, there was always the fear that at night the evil powers would win and there would be no daylight, there would be no good, and the world would simply collapse.
This critically important mission would require a vessel of exceptional power and beauty, a boat fit for a god. And Salima believes this is it. A boat specially designed for the sun god and known as a solar boat or bark.
Tutankhamun and all kings had to have a solar bark in their tomb so they could join with the sun god to carry out this very, very vital battle.
The Egyptian technique of mummification aimed to preserve the entire body, hair, skin, teeth, and bones for eternity. And recently, science has opened a door to the time of the pharaohs. Professor Zink has extracted and analyzed DNA from the most famous mummy of all, Tutankhamun.
It was very difficult to get this prophet together.
For the first time, the DNA gives us a chance to find out for certain who Tut's mother and father were.
Getting DNA out of ancient Egyptian mummies is almost impossible. In the beginning it was a mess, but when we managed to get this away, to clean out the samples, we got really pure DNA to manage to tell something about him and especially about his ancestry.
To untangle King Tut's family tree, Professor Zink analyzed DNA from 10 royal mummies suspected of being related to him. One was his predecessor, Akhenaten. Of course, sons often succeeded their fathers, but it wasn't always the case.
There was one idea that maybe the skeleton of Akhenaten was the father, but nobody had the proof for this. And the only way to find this out was to analyze the DNA. We got from both mummies good results, and we could compare them. As you can see here, we put them aus here, you get this peak here, and this is for King Tut, and you get the same peak here for Akhenaten. Okay. We compared the genetic fingerprint of King Tut and Kiwi 55. And in every one of these, we have the same marker in King Tut and Kiwi 55. And these results clearly showed that they are father and son.
Albert proved beyond doubt who Tut's father was.
In 2012, Tut's burial chamber was showing worrying signs of decay. So Adam Lowe and his team of conservation experts embarked on a pioneering mission to create a high-resolution 3D model of the chamber before it decayed any further.
What our interest really is to capture a true likeness of a surface, to ensure that the knowledge contained in those tombs did not get lost.
They scanned the full 860 square feet of the chamber's walls. These scans revealed incredible detail, not just of the paintings, but of the surface beneath, previously invisible to the naked eye.
High-resolution recording allows us to see much more than many previous generations of art historians have been able to see.
Lowe made the data available to the academic world. For the first time, Egyptologists everywhere could scrutinize Tut's burial chamber in minute detail. And it sparked the interest of Dr. Nicholas Reeves.
The interest of this surface scan is that you can remove the color, so stuff that you can't see because the paintings are blocking, you can actually see the physicality of the wall underneath. Now, that revealed several very interesting features which looked not at all natural.
Reeves noticed something extraordinary. Possible evidence of two doorways, filled in and seemingly untouched. On the scan of the north wall, now stripped of paint, Reeves saw faint lines that mark out what he believes is a hidden doorway.
There may be another doorway behind the north wall.
Ever since Howard Carter discovered Tut's tomb in the early 1920s, these faint markings have gone completely unnoticed. What is the real story of Tut's tomb? And can new clues help reveal its ultimate secrets? In a quest to find answers, Chris Naunton has traveled to the Valley of the Kings, where Carter made his original spectacular discovery. Inside the tomb, he notes something striking about the design.
So one of the first things you notice when you enter this tomb, you come down the descending passageway and you need to take a right turn. And this is quite unusual for 18th dynasty tombs because in most cases what you would expect of a pharaoh's tomb would be a left-hand turn.
In ancient Egypt, the left was a symbol of masculinity. It was so important that the entrance to every king's tomb from Tut's dynasty involves an immediate turn to the left. The only other right-hand turn is in the tomb of Hatshepsut, a female pharaoh.
So the question then is, if in the case of the tomb of Hatshepsut, a right turn means the tomb of a female pharaoh, should we be expecting here not the burial of a male king, Tutankhamun, but a female pharaoh instead?
It appears King Tut's tomb was probably built not for a man, but for a woman. The female clues do not end there. Dr. Yasmin El-Shazli sees something intriguing about them.
If you look carefully at the faces on the stoppers of these canopic jars,
you'll notice that the portrait is quite different from that of Tutankhamun.
They look more feminine.
Experts agree that the heads on Tut's canopic jars have features that are more like a woman than a man. And remarkably, experts are even finding female features on the most famous piece of Tut's treasure, his death mask. Normally, a king's mask would all be made out of the same materials. But Tut's mask is different. El Shazly reveals why.
The face is originally separate from the headdress, and they were welded together. So they are two different pieces.
There is a further clue on the ears of the mask's headdress.
The earlobes are very interesting because the ears were originally perforated. In three-dimensional art, men did not normally represent themselves with perforated ears. It suggests that the face itself did not originally belong to the rest of the headdress and that the headdress belonged to a woman.
The pierced ears indicate that Tut's iconic headdress may originally have been made for a woman, as were many other objects in Tut's tomb. The enduring question has been, who was she?
Radiologist Professor Ashraf Salim is about to conduct the first ever virtual post-mortem of King Tutankhamun. To answer one key question: was Tut murdered by a blow to the back of the head?
Just to start with the beginning here, that we can see that the mummy is in a very bad state. The whole body is cut into pieces. Hundreds of fractures, probably when they tried to remove the heavy golden mask that was stuck to the chest and the abdomen of King Tut. Most, if not all, 99% of the fractures were induced post-mortem.
So much of the discussion has been about the skull, is that somehow Tut was killed or murdered by a blow to the back of the head.
Yeah, because of these bone fragments. If you can see with me now, this is the skull. We're going into it. These bone fragments lying loose within the skull cavity. Meaning what? Meaning that these bone fragments got inside after mummification. That's why they're loose.
So we can say, without a shadow of a doubt, that Tut wasn't murdered by a blow to the back of the head, as has been suggested.
100%. The CT solved the mystery. He was not murdered by a blow to the head.
For almost a century, Tutankhamun's dazzling treasures displayed in the Cairo Museum have told the story of the boy king's short life. But now, as all of his 5,000 treasures are being brought together at the new Grand Egyptian Museum, another far stranger tale is emerging. Not of Tutankhamun's life, but of his supernatural experiences after death.
The ancient Egyptians weren't obsessed with death. They were obsessed with living, and they wanted to live the best life they could, and they wanted that to continue if they could after death.
Egyptologists believe this is why Tutankhamun's tomb was crammed full of everything from golden statues to simple loincloths. His tomb was a colossal supernatural suitcase, packed with everything he'd need to help him navigate the afterlife and live there forever. But what did Tutankhamun expect to find when or if he got there? For Egyptologist Salima Ikram, the answer lies in some of the smallest items discovered in his tomb.
You needed to eat in the afterlife, and Tutankhamun was a teenage boy, so clearly he wanted to be well supplied. And so he had bread, he had wine, he had pomegranates, little green onions, and garlic, so he could flavor his food or munch on the green onion. And there are dates. There are piles of dates here. But what's really amazing about Tutankhamun's dates is that they were pitted, so he wouldn't have to chew around and throw out the pit. So these are really posh dates for the afterlife.
And these were just the appetizers. For the entree, Tutankhamun could choose from an all-you-can-eat buffet of Egypt's finest meats.
He had ribs, he had large joints of meat coming from the foreleg of cattle. And there are all these boxes of mummified poultry. Often the containers are made in the shape of what they are supposed to contain.
It was a feast fit for a pharaoh, pre-cooked, pre-packed, and preserved for eternity.
Ordinarily, there was a very clearly articulated process for burying the king and making sure that everything was perfect.
It appears that this was not the case for Tut.
One of the interesting features of these walls and the paintings is these strange sort of spotty marks. These black patches that you see all around the walls are in fact organic. They are mold.
This mold appears nowhere else in the Valley of the Kings. At first, conservation experts worried that in this otherwise dry environment, the mold was being caused by the breath and sweat of countless tourists. But a study of Howard Carter's original photographs revealed that this could not be the case. And it gives experts an insight into events over 3,000 years ago, to the precise time of young Tut's burial. It seems that his tomb was sealed before the paint on the walls had dried.
The supposition is that the walls had some residual humidity from the painting that was still there when the tomb was sealed.
In this case, if the paint was still wet, you very much have this sense that everything was done as quickly as possible.
Conservation expert Adam Lowe and his team recently took high-resolution photographs of the burial chamber's paintings. At a resolution of up to 100 microns, they reveal details as small as the tip of a human hair, including the individual brushstrokes of ancient craftsmen. Seen close up, the brushstrokes do seem to have been painted in a hurry.
You can see here there are clearly traces of brush marks that are clearly done like this. So they're not done like this. The application of the ochre color is done very fast with bigger brushes. I mean, that's a very fast mark. That's a... my estimate is that it wouldn't have taken a team of skilled painters much over a week to paint Tutankhamun's tomb.
Painting a king's tomb normally took years of work. So why was Tut's tomb prepared in such a rush? Egyptian kings normally had their tombs built and decorated long before they died. But Tut's mummy reveals he died unexpectedly, around the age of just 19. According to ancient tradition, only 70 days can elapse between the moment of the king's death and the sealing of his tomb.
Dr. Hutan Ashrafian is a leading surgeon. He specializes in cold cases from the ancient past. By carefully studying the family, Dr. Ashrafian's noticed distinct medical patterns that together could explain what killed King Tut.
The family are very interesting in that they all died relatively young. We know that Akhenaten died early. We know that Tutankhamun, his son, died early. We know that the great-grandfather died relatively early. They died at a sequentially younger age.
There's another familial pattern hidden here in plain sight.
So this is Tut's dad, we think.
So this is the statue of Akhenaten. Let's have a look at him. And you know, clearly this is not a male form.
It does look very feminine, wider hips.
This is meant to be a pharaoh, but he doesn't look like a normal man.
Several generations show the same body shape. And a recent analysis of Tut's loincloths found in his tomb reveal that his hips were also abnormally wide. Dr. Ashrafian believes some of King Tut's family suffered from gynecomastia, causing men to develop feminine features such as breasts and rounded hips. Our search for a genetic culprit is narrowing. Tut's mother, the younger lady. She's been laid to rest here, back in Cairo, in the treasure trove that is the Egyptian Museum. Here, just a few feet away, are the remains of Akhenaten, Tut's father. When Albert compared his genetic profile with that of the younger lady's, he discovered something shocking.
It's not only that this is the father and this is the mother of King Tut. It turned out that they are brother and sister, which was a big surprise for us.
So Tut's mother and father, so their mother and father, they were also brother and sister. So Tut was a product of incest.
A lot of incest happened. They didn't like to get royal and non-royal blood mixed, so they tried to keep it within the royal family.
So it's official. Comprehensive genetic profiling has proved that Tut's parents were brother and sister. Tutankhamun was born out of incest. In a 21st century museum and a 3,500-year-old tomb, Egyptologists are piecing together the supernatural story of Tutankhamun's life after death. Of a pharaoh on a mission through the underworld, fighting against the forces of darkness to save the sun and the earth from annihilation. With the highest possible stakes, the people who packed Tutankhamun's tomb did everything in their power to ensure he was prepared for the mission ahead.
The ancient Egyptians were very big on insurance, so they had lots of safety nets in case one thing didn't work, one spell didn't work, there was a backup spell. If this got destroyed, there was another backup object. So you always had things that would help you get to where you wanted to.
Egyptologists now believe this is why Tutankhamun took 5,000 objects to the afterlife. The more he took, the more chance he had of defeating the demons and overcoming the obstacles that lay ahead. But one shocking find has always perplexed archaeologists: the mummified bodies of 2 baby girls. Today, their fragile remains are being conserved at the Grand Egyptian Museum. DNA analysis reveals these 2 tiny girls were most likely Tutankhamun's daughters. But tragically, both had been stillborn. One girl at around 4 months, and the other at nearly full term.
There was such a high mortality rate for infants and sort of stillborn children in the ancient world that it's not surprising. But it is extraordinary to have them carefully mummified, wrapped up, cocooned, put in these coffins and placed in their father's tomb.
These tiny mummies are an incredibly rare discovery. But Egyptologist Joyce Tilsley believes there is an explanation for their burial alongside the pharaoh. She suspects they were the ultimate insurance policy.
Tutankhamun was very wealthy. He could have dug a grave for his daughters anytime he wanted to. So the fact that their bodies have been saved to be buried with him suggests that perhaps it's not just a practical reason, but there's a ritual reason for them being there as well.
In ancient Egyptian art, women and girls were often cast as protectors, standing alongside their fathers or the gods. And for Joyce, they were more than simply good luck charms. They were active participants in Tutankhamun's journey through the underworld.
By being either physically in the boat with Tutankhamun or just having their spirits supporting him while he's in the boat, Tutankhamun will be protected by these 2 daughters who he has in the tomb with him.